This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. I am your host, as usual, for this wonderful Sunday afternoon conversation. Today is, I expect, going to be an interesting conversation because we are going to have a frank discussion about what the future holds, what the past has taught us, and what the present moment means for the official opposition. Joining us today, of course, is the chairman of the Free National Movement, Dr. Dwayne Sands. Dr. Sands, welcome back to the Political Review.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a rainy Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. When it rains, it pours. Before we get into our conversation with Dr. Sands, I wanted to point out a couple of things from the headlines this week. One of them, of course, the sale of the Grand Lucaya for $100 million, which the government hopes will trigger other investments. And on the same token, Chester Cooper, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism and Aviation, says that he expects a new airport in Grand Bahama by early 2025. It's going to be interesting to see how the government goes about funding that particular development. And the other big news for us here at the Political Review was what was said in the Senate by the Minister for Economic Affairs, the Honorable Michael Halkitis, who basically what he said, after a government-approved increase in the prices of some bread basket items, Mr. Halkitis, Senator Halkitis, talked about the fact that the government is giving the issue of inflation serious attention, but he also says that it's that the government's relief options are limited, and I wanted to flag that because I think that is something that we are going to have to pay very close attention to in coming months as COVID-19 continues to affect the economy and the health sector. The old saying popularized by the late Dr. Bernard J. Nottage, "The health of a nation is the wealth of a nation," suggests that continued stresses and struggles with the COVID-19 pandemic will have deleterious effects on the economy of the Bahamas, as well as effects in terms of community health and community life. Our lifestyle is different now than it was, and the actions of the government of the day will have serious effects on how we as a community move on and adapt to the new normal, which appears to be let's just find a way to live with COVID-19. Now, China continues to pursue a zero COVID policy. And so they have, something like 25 million people in lockdown in different Chinese cities and states. And they are not having the kind of success with the zero COVID policy that the policymakers would hope. And we in the Bahamas have had our own challenges with testing, with the availability of testing, with the percentage of the community that has been tested and vaccinated. And it is early days yet, in my view, to say that we're at the point now where it's time to take off the gloves and just learn to live with COVID-19. I'm arranging a conversation with an epidemiologist for us here in a week or two to dig into that issue a little deeper. But it occurs to me that since we have a former Minister of Health and the person who led the initial fight against COVID-19, and by most accounts led it well, we have Dwayne Sands here. I think that there is no harm in starting our conversation with Dr. Sands on with this a brief conversation on where we are with COVID-19 and what the government has done up to now to protect Bahamians, protect the economy, and treat the pandemic as a serious threat to our way of life. Dr. Sands, do you believe that we are in good shape when it comes to COVID-19 in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas at this point?
Well, good afternoon. I can't say that we are in good shape. When today's or yesterday's COVID numbers are released, I think the Bahamian public will be shocked at how many positive PCR cases we have. Certainly more than 60 cases yesterday, and hospitalizations up well above 12. I think 14. Bear in mind that a few months ago, we were in low single digits, and now we're on average 20 cases a day, and now going even higher. The positivity rates very high, well above the 5% threshold that suggested we're testing adequately and have a good hand. Our vaccination numbers are still only around 50%. And so if we are to believe the thought that the United States and Europe and the rest of the world is likely to see another significant surge of COVID sometime in the summer, even when they have vaccination rates around 70%, we in the Bahamas find that we're not in the same league. That said, it's very unpopular for anybody to talk about mask wearing, social distancing, because people are just sick and tired of COVID. And so it becomes very important that you learn how to be responsible and disciplined, but still live. And I think that where the sweet spot is for the Bahamas is identifying that point of discipline, as opposed to suggesting to everybody, man, let the good times roll on. The downside is that if we are not disciplined, then the important face-to-face education can't happen. We've seen St. Anne's, St. Augustine's, QC, and at least one of the government schools close because of clusters of COVID just this last week. And that is a horrible consequence because our children have suffered so much. And so if we say nothing else, we need to make sure that COVID is well maintained and managed in the Bahamas, because we're going to keep our eye on the ball and remain disciplined and get vaccinated, if only so that our children can go to school.
I hesitate to ask this only because I think that COVID-19 is an issue that is bigger than party politics. But the fact is, how the government approaches dealing with COVID is purely determined by party politics and how the party that is in power prioritizes its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So you sat in the chair, you led the fight, you are now on the other side of the aisle. And so how do you rate the response of Dr. Darville and the Davis administration so far to dealing with this pandemic?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I think you are dead on, spot on right, that the ideal approach to COVID is an all of society engaged with all of government approach. And you may say that's utopian, but realistically, the impact is so huge that if we don't include all of society in these discussions, we're going to get it wrong. I think that certainly the Minister of Health and Wellness has done a reasonable job thus far. He has been measured in his comments. They have had some gaffes, but those gaffes have come from other ministers and other ministries, surprisingly from the Prime Minister himself. And so there's this awkward tension between what's happening in the tourism sector. One of the biggest challenges right now would be the resorts. It is, how do you appease the tourism sector? How do you never, ever, never, ever, never, ever say the word lockdown again? But at the same time, understand that this can get out of hand pretty quickly, and you don't have capacity in your healthcare system if it does.
So on the question of lockdown, I recall when it was the tool that the Menace administration found most appropriate. At the time, it had the support of the Davis-led opposition, PLP. They initially supported the lockdown. Do you believe that we are, taking what you just said, I just want to be clear, do you believe that we are past the stage at which a government would consider locking down the country again?
Probably. I think that COVID has evolved. We didn't know what was going to happen. On March the 15th, 2020, we had the first case of COVID in the Bahamas freaked out. Remember that day?
I do.
We all freaked out. Oh my goodness, this horrible disease is here. What's going to happen to us? It was as if the plague had hit the Bahamas. And it was the same response all around the world. We were, watching every single day to see when that first case was going to hit. Well, 35,000 or so cases later, 801 deaths later, you don't have the same response. And what seemed to be an appropriate response back then, clearly not an appropriate response now, which is not to say that there would never, ever, ever be an appropriate need. The politics of COVID is that everything negative about lockdowns and the economic impact has been weaponized. And the Progressive Liberal Party would like to say, oh, you see, the Free National Movement, they were the ones that put you in your house and wouldn't let you leave the yard and locked up the coconut boys, etc. The truth of the matter is that as we learned how to manage COVID, there were changes, relaxation, and I think that the country ought to continue on this path of disciplined relaxation. What ought to also happen is that perhaps we should move this out of the sole purview of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and incorporate civil society in the decision making. And I think that would make a lot more sense, particularly if you establish the metrics that lead to this happening. And when should you start recommending masks? When do you allow for unfettered jubilation in the street with 1,500 people, 2,000 people, etc.? I think if you agree by conversation with stakeholders, now you have your country running democratically, and the government acts as the catalyst, as opposed to, we are going to tell you what to do, and this is why you're going to do it, etc.
Okay, so I don't want to beat that horse anymore, but I want to flag that. I want to plant a flag there, or stick a pin to say that we're watching how public policy with regard to COVID-19 unfolds, and the response of the government is something that we're paying very close attention to, because I think it can lead to either a reduction or an increase in the rate at which the virus spreads. I think the government is that powerful. If the government says, if it goes one way and says, no more restrictions, I think we could be looking at a much worse surge than I think is inevitable. But then by the same token, you can't go too far the other direction. So moderation, I think, in all things.
Moderation, discipline, and data. If we share data widely and let people know the basis of incremental changes. When the positivity rate hits X, this is going to trigger Y. When the number of PCR positive cases hits a certain point, then it's the green, yellow, orange, red scenario that exists in a number of countries, and that people have bought into fairly significantly. When you make partners, not just of the opposition, sounds bizarre, right? Make partners of the opposition to participate in the briefings, and we've asked repeatedly. What it does is it helps to depoliticize something that probably ought not be politicized, because when you're flying high and the numbers are 2 and 3 cases a day, and you're reaching over to pat yourself on the back, it's a far cry different when you got 200 cases a day, 100 people in hospital, and the deaths are starting to climb. Because if you're going to own it when the numbers are low, then you better own it when the numbers are high.
Yeah. So it happens, it just so happens, Dwayne Sands, that last week we saw the 10th of May, 2022, which was set to be a very important day in the life of our party politics. Most of us in the country, I mean, by most 99.999% of us expected to be going to the polls this last week And then, lo and behold, the former Prime Minister, the most honorable, Dr. Hubert Minnis, called a snap election on September 16th, and on September 17th, what had been a significant free national movement lead in the House of Assembly turned into a bloodbath at the polls. And I was having conversations over the last week about whether or not the turnout or the outcome of the election might have been different if Dr. Minnis had waited and given time for some of the things that had been in the development stages to come to pass. And there's a strong argument. I mean, it's arguing over spilt milk, obviously, but there's a strong feeling that the FNM certainly would have been in a stronger position to contest the election if it had been last week, rather than the state that it was in September.
So 40 years ago, I was a medical student, first-year medical student. And one of the important principles that I learned was that the best diagnostician in medicine is the pathologist, okay? Because when you do an autopsy, you can tell exactly what killed the patient.
Yes.
And so we have done a postmortem of September 2021. And to the question that you pose, it is probable, and again, this is Monday morning quarterback, it is probable that the outcome of the election would have been different. Now, that doesn't mean that the FNM would necessarily have won the election, okay? But certainly, when you look at a scenario where in 2017, the FNM would have gotten 91,000 votes. And you had a voter turnout of 88%. And you move to 2021 and the FNM gets 46,000 votes. And the turnout is 65%. What you basically know is that half of your voters stayed home. The Progressive Liberal Party won an additional 28 seats by securing a paltry 250 votes per seat. So they got another 7,000 and change votes, and they gained 28 additional seats from 4 to where they are now. So it's, when you see the projects that they have rolled out that had been started under the previous administration, when you see the improvement in tourism, when you see the improvement in the economy and so on, which clearly predated September, and now we are reaping some of the benefits. I'm not trying to say that they have done nothing. What I am saying is that the momentum was already moving. It is possible that you might have seen a more sizable opposition, but we don't know what the negative view of the Free National Movement would have been in October, November, December, etc. And whether or not a number of the things that we recognize that we probably may feel compelled to say we're sorry. Hold on, I got a little voice. Let me move her a second, okay? Give me 2 seconds.
No worries, no problem. Yeah. So while Dr. Sands is dealing with the little voice, the fact is for people who are paying attention to the political directorate and the political arena, they will know that the FNM had a conclave this weekend, which I have heard described as a come to Jesus moment within the Free National Movement. I have heard that there was the equivalent of blood on the dance floor, and that there was some hard truths that were spoken. And so I want to ask about that conclave. There are some people who, the Monday morning quarterbacks, the armchair quarterbacks, the pundits who sit on the sidelines, the people who have no stake in the FNM, the people who do not carry a card. There's a bunch of us who have a view of what the FNM should learn or should have learned and what the FNM should be doing now. But having just come through that conclave experience, I will ask, as the chairman of the party, how you feeling? I mean, are you okay? Is you're not bleeding anywhere under that shade or anything like that?
No. Let's look at where we've come from. September 2021, we took a significant cut behind at the polls. By November, we had gone into a special convention and we chose a new leader. In February, we elected a whole new slate of party officers, myself included, a new deputy leader. We had installation of new deputy chairs and so on and so forth. We then selected executive committee members. We subsequently had a retreat for party officers so they understood what they needed to do in order to function. But one critical thing that we needed to do was to have this come to Jesus moment where we could look critically with data, with objective information to look at what caused the loss and how do we move forward. Because if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so we looked critically, deliberately, and dispassionately at all of the things that have been said. We've talked about some of them. One of the things that we realized was that our ground game, our constituency associations were not up to the task. And one thing that we recognize is that we are now going to be very laser focused on rebuilding them so that we are ready to contest the next general election whenever it's held. There were some things that the FNM did during its administration that we disappointed some people. We disappointed them greatly. And we recognize that there will be a need for atonement. That we got to say, hey, look, we recognize that we could have done some things very differently. And had we done some things differently, perhaps you would not have had the personal pain that you did, or that your family would not have experienced what they did. We can't turn history back, but we can try to convince you with the sincerity of our effort and approach that we will be different moving forward. We had to look at the players and the role that they played in victory in 2017 and defeat in 2021. And so, having come out of conclave now, that then moves us on to a series of homecoming events in the Family Islands. Reclamation of persons who said, you know, hey, I ain't gonna vote PLP, but I ain't voting FNM, not this lot. 45,000 people that supported the FNM in 2017 did not vote FNM this time. PLP won with an additional 7,000 votes.
Yeah, this is a validation of the. I mean, the math was simple. And you look at the returns from 2017 and the returns from 2021, you could see that half of the people who voted for the FNM in 2017 did not vote in 2021. And the anecdotal reasons that were given outside of the data that you've examined. She's such a cutie. That evidence is that, well, the wrap here is number one, that Dr. Minnis was a problem. Number two, that the F&M didn't tell its success story properly. Number three, that the way COVID was managed was problematic, particularly the lockdowns. And number four, that you did not employ some of your best assets during the campaign to try to reach out to those disaffected F&Ms.
And you also, I think it's important to recognize the fact that circumstances, whether it was acts of nature, acts of the environment, led to unprecedented economic catastrophes. Tourism went from an all-time high to nothing. Many people who were doing quite well were either unemployed or underemployed. You had food security challenges. And whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, this happened under our watch, okay? And so you may say, but you shouldn't hold that against me. My brother, I had a job in 2017. I don't have a job now. You, the government, okay? This fella say he's gonna get me a job. I go in with that. Take it from me, please. So when we look at that reality, and I am not moving away from whether or not we managed it expertly, whether or not we communicated properly. That's a different discussion. The situation is, the economics of the time for a greater percentage of the people were worse in 2021 than they were in 2017, and that factored into the equation. In terms of how the F&M interacted with the press, how the F&M interacted with the public, the perception of whether or not we were perceived in a negative way as arrogant and otherwise factored into the loss. You put that all together, as well as polling data that was inaccurate. It was just plain out wrong. And you put that all together and you have an early election that results in a wipeout.
I'm sorry, polling data that was wrong. Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, clearly you had data that would have helped to drive decision-making. And I've seen some of that data, and I don't believe that the interpretation of that data was correct.
Dr. Sands, you are causing me problems.
Quincy,
because the natural question is, who did those polls?
We could get into a granular discussion, and I don't think that that I'm minded to do that right now, because clearly we could sit here all afternoon and discuss what I've just said. But
this is a political review. I mean, this is what yes. that's what this forum is for.
Absolutely, and you're the one asking the questions, and I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability. But basically, I don't believe that the decisions followed as appropriately from the data as they should have.
So, in terms of, okay, so sum it up for us if you can in simple terms. Having had the data and examined it in conclave with nobody in the room who shouldn't be in the room so that everyone could say what they had to say without fear and without favor. The consensus was that the FNM lost the election because fill in the blank.
A multiplicity of challenges, and we've gone through some of them. The economic realities, the perception of the Free National Movement, the bad timing of the election in the middle of a COVID pandemic, the fact that half of FNMs stayed home, the support or lack thereof of the people that were running at various levels. And, in 2017, some would say that the election was decided because of the view of the then Prime Minister Christie. And, we have morphed into an almost presidential election scenario. And so when one team loses now, how much of that is due to the perception of the leader? And so, we need to look at how does an organization with 50 years of experience, which has contributed phenomenally to the development of this country, who has, as has every political organization that has vied for office, be in 97, FNM, 2002, PLP, 2007, FNM, 2012, and on and on and on. But now you have an FNM that says, are we able to learn what actually happened and then adjust so that we are a viable entity in 2026? Because nothing is promised to any organization. You have to work for the privilege of earning the trust of the Bahamian people. You can't go out there and assume that, well, because the FNM and the PLP have been flip-flopping for the last 20 years, that they're going to hand us the country on a silver platter next time. You need to know what you did right, what you did wrong, what your challenges are, what your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats are now. And you've got to see what is the way forward. And this organization is working very, very hard to rebrand itself as a viable political force, having come from a phenomenal beating politically 8 months ago.
You referenced the 2017 election, which basically, I don't think anyone can argue that election was a referendum on Perry Christie, the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry G. Christie. And the referendum was very clear. Even PLPs voted against Mr. Christie because they had enough of whatever, for whatever reasons, right? I think that there are a number of people who are of the view that this election was a referendum on Dr. Minnis. And I don't necessarily want to dig too deep into that, except to ask whether that came up during the conclave yesterday.
Yes, it did.
Well, you can't. Okay, so if you're gonna,
I think in the comments that I've made already, that there is a belief that the leadership of Hubert Minnis, for better or for worse, was a significant factor in the public's perception of the political organization, the Free National Movement. And you see where we are now. We are 7 seats in the House of Assembly.
Yeah.
It's, the organization now has to own its past, but it also has to break away from that past and say that, hey, an organization led by Michael Pintard, Deputy Shannon Dawn Cartwright, and the various executive officers otherwise, yes, we are like the phoenix rising up from the ashes. We are going to rebuild this organization and regain the public's trust by doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Now, I am not about to show you the play card or telegraph how we're going to do what we're going to do, but understand, and this will be one of those rare occasions when I'll give credit to the Progressive Liberal Party. They came from a deficit of 35-4, and they're now the government. So clearly, they understood that, hey, we're in the dungeon right now, and we've got to figure out how do we get out of this. Now, one of the issues is in governance, you got to take the good with the bad. We had some historic challenges, COVID and Dorian. And, we did the best that we could possibly do. And that factored into people's perception. This administration now finds historic, at least recent history levels of inflation, challenges with food insecurity, that they will have great difficulty tackling. They may not want to deal with this, but when the buying power of many people in the electorate starts to drop, and some people would say plummet, you got to own that, because your policies now are going to be viewed through that lens. So when we talk about putting VAT on breadbasket items and putting VAT on medication, when we talk about the decisions that you have to make in order to ensure that NIB survives, when the people that sell propane say that, hey, you are forcing us to sell propane at less than it costs us to bring it to market, and the bus drivers say that we can't survive, and so on and so forth. The economic and fiscal policies of this administration has to evolve commensurate with the challenges that they didn't necessarily create. And one thing that I've noticed thus far is that this administration has chosen to be stubborn and tone deaf. And so they said, look, we made the decision, we ain't going back on that, despite the fact that they are driving tens, hundreds, thousands of people below the poverty line with their fiscal decisions.
The headlines from Friday say that the increase on bread basket items is on the order of 7%. That's going to come in addition to the VAT, I suppose, on those items. So there had been an argument that the VAT would not necessarily lead to a price increase in the bread basket. Well, now we know that it will on the order of 7%. And that is a significant hike, and it only affects the lowest economic strata of the country. And that, to me, is problematic for, and since this is a political review, I'm gonna talk politically here. That's a problem for the PLP because they consistently identify themselves as the quote unquote poor man's party. But this particular policy seems aimed at getting more money out of the poor man's pocket. And there's a philosophical challenge as well as the economic challenge there. I feel like there's something wrong with going after the money in the poor man's pocket but not going after the money for real estate taxes or some of the other revenue opportunities that exist.
So if you were to look at the net impact on the public purse for the addition of VAT of 10% on breadbasket items and medication, and you compare that to what it would have been if you had left VAT at 12% on real estate transactions above $2 million, it probably would have been a wash, okay? But in terms of the impact on those individuals, you now have people making $230, $240, $250 a week, $300 a week, who have to eat, who got to buy medication, sanitary pads, baby formula, whatever, and they are disproportionately impacted. We realize that VAT is a regressive tax. It always has been. And so you have chosen now to give a break to those who can, who don't really need it. So why have you been stubborn and not want to be a bit more progressive in your taxation policy, at the same time claiming to love the poor? Simultaneously, you have watched this revisit of real property tax, and you've seen some people with real property tax increases of 100%, 200%, 300%. The belief is that somehow this review of real property tax is something that people are just going to eat. But, you know, where am I going to find an additional $100,000 if I'm a business in 1 year? I've already made my budget. Okay, I've already decided that I'm going to put this amount towards salary and staff benefits and this amount towards electricity. Yes, you didn't create the Ukraine-Russian war. You didn't drive up the price of oil, but price of oil has gone up. The price of transportation of goods from around the world has gone up. And now I am forced to figure out how I'm going to keep my business running and keep all of my staff employed. You're about to say that the wage bill ought to go up. Now, let me be very, very clear. We need to ensure that the buying power of ordinary people is optimized. But when you look at it from the other side, the businesses, particularly the small and medium-sized businesses, find themselves struggling to survive. This is before we start the NIB discussion. And that is a whole different discussion that the Prime Minister himself took his finger, put it up in the wind and say, hey, but brother, I ain't messing with that right now.
NIB is scary because I wrote a couple of stories on it when I first got the auditor's report from Morneau Chappelle in the early 2010s. I think it was a 2009 report that I got that showed that the fund would be bankrupt by 2030, 2035, I think it is, right? And at the time that I wrote the story, that was still 20 years plus away. Here we are now, 2022, and in 13 years or so, you're looking at the bankruptcy of the social safety net, the only social safety net that exists in the country.
Let me correct you. The latest actuarial report says in 6 years, NIB will be broke. By 2028, it is now 2022. Okay? So if you talk about, is this thing way, way down the road? No. If you look at the level of the NIB reserves in 2013, 2014, it was about $1.8 billion. Okay? Back then, we recognized that there weren't enough contributors, that the level of contribution wasn't enough, and that the amount of benefits that were being taken out of NIB, inclusive of the prescription drug plan, was not being adequately financed. Now comes the pandemic and the requirement for additional unemployment benefits to the tune of $200+ million. And if you were to now try to determine where the NIB reserve fund is, it's probably way less than $1 billion now. I haven't seen the numbers, but this is just me on the back of a napkin. How is it that we believe that NIB was one of the single most significant social instruments and that we are unprepared to make another intervention? The last major intervention was 2010. Another intervention to ensure that NIB survives so that when you retire and when I retire, because I retire in 5 years, that I will be able to collect a pension. I've been paying my NIB from I started working. But they tell me NIB can be broke if nothing changes. And the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas says he ain't on that run. He ain't dealing with that right now. He will find a creative way there. You see, actuarial science has nothing to do with creativity. Okay? They look at data and they say, my brother, by such and such a day, there will be no money in the bank. No fanfare, and this is what you need to do. And so it is not subject to, let's color it purple, let's color it pink, let's color it red. It is pure, simple mathematics.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to the conclave, but what you are saying now is something that brings to mind a conversation that I have been having with people who are concerned citizens. That conversation is, where is the FNM? Where is the party that is standing up in the public arena and saying, hey, this is a problem, this needs to be addressed? There is a sense that, and I mean literally just today, about 2 hours ago, I was having a conversation with someone who said to me that it just seems like the FNM is content to sit on the sidelines and not say anything, not involve itself in public discourse. Now, I know from this platform that there are, that there are a number of FNM communication initiatives, but they don't seem to be digging deep. So, as the chairman and the public mouthpiece, I have to ask, where is the FNM, especially on something like NIB? I mean, you gotta have a megaphone and stand in Rawson Square and yell and scream.
I have been very vocal on this issue, to the point where we look at the government's response, the Prime Minister's response to commentary. We don't oppose just simply for opposing. We choose our battles well, I believe. And yes, we're a small force right now, and we're also in the midst of regrouping, reorganizing, etc. And so we are not omnipresent. We believe that the comments that we make are impactful. I am happy that people are still wanting to hear from the Free National Movement, because it means that there's a level of relevance still. And you can't take that for granted that will continue. So since perception is reality, then we'll steadily ratchet up our approach. Don't forget, budget is coming, and I suspect
I hear it's this week.
Budget debate is going to be an interesting knockdown, drag out political fight because this administration has gone on a spending spree, hiring spree. They have promised a new airport in Freeport, a new hospital in Nassau, a new hospital in Grand Bahama. And the question is, we didn't get the money to pay for all this. Okay? You have the problem with NIB, you haven't dealt with it. You have the problem with inflation, you haven't dealt with it. You have decided, based on your own utterances, that your tax policy is going to drive a significant number of people below the poverty line, and yet your own budget does not show an increased allocation to social services to rescue those people. As a matter of fact, the minister with responsibility for social services said there's less of a need. I don't know where he's living, because the New Providence, the Bahamas that I live in, there are huge numbers of people with food insecurity.
This is the thing, right? Politics makes you say strange things. And sometimes you say what you have to for political reasons, no matter what is true, so to speak. You put your objective truth in your pocket and you speak your political truth because you have a party objective to meet. We're used to that in the community from our politicians. We lament it because it means you can't automatically trust what politicians say, because political expediency will change what is true and what is not. But my question on this issue of where the FNM is as an advocate for those of us who are outside of the political arena and who do not have a voice, it just seems like it's something that, as the chairman, I think you need to be aware of and take note of, that there are people wanting to hear your voice as a party and feeling like you're not present in the market. And that, to me, that is of great concern.
Okay, I think what's very important is that you not only listen, but you accept what is said and not get defensive about it. We find ourselves working almost unceasingly, okay, with strategy discussions, generating positions, disseminating them, and so on and so forth. You have said that there is a perception in the public that we are not doing enough. I have to accept that. And to simply say that perhaps what happens is, as you ratchet up and people get to see the fruits of the labor, that you are on a crescendo as opposed to coming down. So let's see what the next month and the next month and the next month entails in terms of the public perception of what we are doing, what we're saying, and whether or not we are making impactful, cogent, relevant statements as opposed to just blowing smoke out of our you-know-what.
Yes, indeed. You're listening. I'm sorry, Dwayne. It's 5 o'clock. I want to do a little station idea here, folks. Okay. You're listening to the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. As usual on Sunday, this is our real estate, and we're excited to be here. Today, we're talking with Dr. Dwayne Sands, the chairman of the Free National Movement. The F&M had a conclave yesterday, and it was a come to Jesus moment at which some hard truths were spoken, and Dr. Sands is sharing with us what some of those hard truths might be. We'd love to hear from you in text. That's 422-4796. You can text us your comments or questions for Dr. Sands at 422-4796. Dr. Sands, do you mind if we open the phone lines in a half an hour or so?
Let's go ahead.
All right. And at 5:30, we'll start taking phone calls as well. Of course, you know the numbers, 323-6232, 325-4316, and 325-4259. You know, we don't usually do phone calls here on the Political Review, but today, it's the chairman of the Free National Movement, Dwayne Sands, but he ain't scared. So we'll be back in just a few moments. I hear that music, Wally, and we'll be right back with Dr. Dwayne Sands.
You got to pay the sponsors, man.
How important collecting your money can be to the success of your business. Start your relationship with Fidelity today so that we can show you the many options available to you with our merchant services. From click and pay options online to merchant terminals and e-commerce options. We're here to help your business succeed. For more details, speak to one of our business development officers at 356-7764 in Nassau or 352-6676 in Freeport. Visit our website at fidelitygroup.com or visit any of our branches. Fidelity, we're good for you.
At Koshright, our members know that there's a lot to smile about. They know that membership has its privileges. Guaranteed low pricing on every item, every time you shop. Each membership comes with 2 cards. That's one for you and a free card for a member of your household. Gold card holders earn an annual 2% rebate up to $500. Koshright members get discounts at other participating businesses. So that's a lot to smile about. Whether it be clothing, appliances, home goods, or groceries, shop at Koshright, where membership truly has its privileges.
Do you know you can get your business cards designed and printed for as low as 18 cents a card? If it's a poster you want, you can pay as little as $6 a square foot. If your print needs are short or long run, digital printing, wide format, or print consultation, call the best. Call Print Masters. Print Masters' goal is to provide its clients with the highest level of personal, professional service at an affordable price. Our state-of-the-art technology also makes working together efficient and easy. Laminations, business cards, flyers, posters, window and floor decals are just a few of the digitized print services offered at Print Masters.
Let Print Masters bring your masterpiece to life.
Located in the Nassau Guardian Building, telephone 302-2361.
Loss of family members is very isolating, and people who have experienced loss appreciate when others have shared their grief. If you can't be there in person, go to the Nassau Guardian's website online at thenassauguardian.com and visit our obituary link. The Nassau Guardian's interactive obituary link allows you to read the funeral announcement, express condolences, or place photos on the online guest book for 1 full year. Losing a loved one is painful, but that pain isn't the worst thing to happen. Friends, loved ones, colleagues, and neighbors who ignore the loss compound the pain. Should the bereaved family wish to place the obituary and photos on our obituary site, just contact the Guardian's funeral industry partners or the Nassau Guardian. Remember, there isn't one magic right thing to say to someone experiencing loss that will make the loss less painful or easier to bear. The Nassau Guardian's obituary link, available online at thenassauguardian.com.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Political Review. We're talking with Dr. Dwayne Sands, the chairman of the Free National Movement, the former Minister of Health, the former Member of Parliament for the constituency of Elizabeth, and someone who has dedicated himself in the public arena to life as a servant of the people. The people are not an easy taskmaster, Dwayne Sands.
Well, you know, I think what you learn is that much of the satisfaction that you get from the job of public service is knowing that you have served. And, you know, that may sound corny, that may sound crazy, but, you know, to give without counting the costs, it's what this is all about. And when you lay down in bed and you look up at the ceiling at night and you said, you know, did I do what I should have done? Did I do what a good citizen should have done, a good Christian should have done? If the answer is yes, then forget about the naysayers. You keep rolling.
Just out of curiosity, does the ceiling talk back?
Only after a couple drinks, but you know, don't poke me on that.
I have a text message here, Dr. Sands. And this, I think this is the perfect segue into my next question. It says, the FNM must throw Jonah out of the boat to get back on track. I suspect that all we have to say about that text is Selah. But my question is, based on yesterday's conclave, what is next? I know you don't want to, you know, show your hand and spill the playbook and all of that stuff, but tell us what's next for the FNM if you can.
We recognize that we are stronger together, and that the divergent voices in the country have always been a critical component of the Free National Movement. I mean, the party was started in dissidence, right? And so the expectation that you have a monolithic constituency, that everybody's going to be the same, it's just not the case. The Free National Movement is drawn up of wealthy people, poor people, family island people, Nassau people, people that may be considered fiscally conservative, people that are fiscally liberal, and on and on and on. And what you got to do is come up with a message that binds those very different people together. Should Jonah be thrown out of the boat? If Jonah is prepared to sing from the same hymn sheet, then there's no reason to throw Jonah out of the boat. We have one leader at a time, okay? The leader of the Free National Movement is Michael Clifton Pentard, full stop. There have been other leaders of the Free National Movement, dating back to Cecil Wallace Whitfield. There are some previous leaders that are still alive. Some of them play an integral role as elder statesmen. And that is an appropriate role. But in terms of the direction of the Free National Movement, the compass is set by Michael Pentard. And we leave it at that.
In the early days, it did not seem that I'm gonna take a big swing here and assume that I know who the text is talking about when they say Jonah. And I'm going to say that in the early days, it didn't seem like Jonah wanted to sing from the same hymn sheet. Because Jonah was always off on his own run, so to speak. that has changed in the last month or 2 months. So obviously, conversations were had as appropriate. This is a question that may be a little sensitive for you as the chairman, but there's some FNMs that I've spoken to who question whether Michael is cruel enough. Michael Pintard is cruel enough. Does he have, quote unquote, that killer instinct to cut somebody's throat if they are causing problems? Those are the terms with which it is said to me. So I'm going to rephrase it and ask you: is Michael Pintard the kind of leader who can deal with dissent effectively, particularly if that dissent is problematic in terms of splitting the party message or detracting from the party's agenda?
Let me answer it. I'll give you the short answer, and then I'll give you a more comprehensive answer. The answer is yes, he is up to the task. Now, the longer answer is my first face-to-face interaction with Michael Pintard is when we were both appointed to the Senate in 2010. And so we would have been teammates in the Senate in 2010. In 2016, when I was back in the Senate, I have watched him take on assignments to go up against Terry Christie, to go up against Brave Davis in campaigns, to run in the most unpopular and unlikely seats, to take on the tough jobs, to work as chairman of the Free National Movement, etc. He comes from an unusual background, some might say. But for such a time as this, absolutely, I think he brings the skill sets that this ailing organization needed to heal. And certainly he has my absolute confidence. And I think it makes for an interesting team. It makes for a very interesting team. The team of Pintard, Cartwright, Sands, and Savant Roll. It's a hell of a team. We like to think of ourselves as, we're not the ordinary politicians by any means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What will you do now? Based on the research that was done, based on the let's say everybody who needed to come to Jesus came to Jesus. We all got baptized and filled with the Holy Ghost. So what are we going to do now? What's going on?
You chart a course, being mindful that you may have to reset that course according to the GPS every so often, taking into account the weather, the shoals, the rocks, the reefs, and the composition of people that remain on the boat, because not everybody's going to remain on the boat. Additional people will come on the boat. But what you do is you prepare the organization to govern. And so you have to now not just prepare the party to win, but to conceptualize, to conceive policies, programs, and approaches to make life better for ordinary Bahamians, whether you're talking about the economy, the environment, health, education, etc. The Free National Movement, as the government in waiting, now has to say how it is going to govern, if given an opportunity to govern 4 or 5 years hence, okay? And then you have to strengthen your ground game to the point that you have an opportunity to govern by winning the election. So when this current government starts saying that its members didn't know that they had to disclose, That's an absurdity. It's an absolute absurdity. But that's the best excuse they could come up with, right?
Okay, so generally, I try to stay on this, because I don't need no more crap in my life, right? But that was the most heinous crap I ever heard in my life.
And that's a position taken by their...
Come on, man.
Okay?
Come on, man. We didn't know we had to disclose.
We were new to the game.
The press. No. Let's spend 2 minutes here just so we can be clear. Every election, the press puts out, both newspapers put out a whole entire paper dedicated
to
printing the disclosure forms of every person in the House of Assembly and every person in the Senate who has to disclose, and all the public servants who have to disclose, like permanent secretaries and all of that, right? Every 5 years, you see that in the newspaper. Miles LaRota is on your parliamentary team.
And he knows
the head of the Disclosure Commission.
That's correct.
Is on your parliamentary team. And you have the unmitigated gumption, the absolute brass, to say our members didn't know they had to disclose. If they didn't know they had to disclose, kick them out, because that's foolishness.
So they will not kick them out. And I think you can see a culture emerging here that we can say whatever seems to be reasonable. Let's forgive me for going back to the Prime Minister going through the back door of the jewelry store when he had COVID. No, he was on his way home and he then stopped on the way. No, he didn't really go. He wasn't on quarantine. You remember that whole story?
Yes, I do.
You make up a story to suit the occasion, okay? So now, no less than a couple cabinet ministers and the press secretary make up stories as to why members of parliament from the government side have not disclosed in violation of the law. And the public is listening to this nonsense and going, oh my Lord, really? But they expect to get a bly from it. I like the concept of death by 1,000 cuts, because each of these violations of public trust, you will pay for down the road. Trust me, you can pay for it. You mightn't think you can pay for it, but you can pay for it. And so each time you believe that the Bahamian people don't deserve an honest answer, hey, we screwed up, we messed up, we can deal with these people, we can reprimand them, etc. Because it means that the lawmakers don't believe that the law is important, right? The lawmakers break the law. We could argue about whether the Disclosure Act makes sense, and that's a different discussion. The law says you will disclose. But, you know, the public quietly marks that F under in that category, and then when that report card comes out later on, you realize, boy, I got all these Fs, and then people wonder why they get rolled out. Anyway.
So, didn't know they had to disclose. Charlie. All right, so back to the question, right? You have given me a nice framework for what the FNM will do next. But I want whatever specifics you're prepared to give me. What are you going to actually do in the next, let's say the next year, let's just say the next year.
So one of the physical things that you will see will be the Free National Movement moving about the country quite visibly, dealing with persons who are disaffected with the organization and welcoming them back home. We've started that already. There was a group of members of parliament who were all but thrown out of the party, not formally, but their contributions were no longer required, and they have been welcomed in. A number of them have been appointed as meritorious council members, and they accepted the role, and they have been re-engaged once again. So in a very real way, it is about reconnecting with people. In terms of the specifics of the strategy, no, I don't want to say exactly how and when we're going to do it, because then you're showing your hand a little bit too much. But this is politics is a numbers game. Politics is a numbers game, right? So you don't win an election unless you get more votes than the other fellow. Now, how do you get more votes than the other fellow? You've got to, in the Bahamas, win the hearts and minds of human beings. You have to be seen to be in touch with human beings, that you're approachable, that you identify with their concerns. You don't have to be the solution to all the problems, but you have to be seen to at least care about and be willing to work to solve some of these problems. And, it's politics in the Bahamas is hands-on. So we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. But you also have and this goes back to the very first part of our discussion, and you mentioned it. I was happy that you did. You have a network in terms of your constituency associations that was severely underused in the election in 2016. 2021. Obviously, I think they were caught off guard by the snap election, as was everybody else, except the PLP, who seemed to just come out rolling because they seemed to know something the FNM didn't know. But how are you, based on the conclave yesterday and your whole come to Jesus vibe, how are you going to deal with the constituency associations, especially those ones who felt that they were mistreated by the Central Council and the party machinery?
Yeah, I think we've been here before. If you think about those elections that the FNM lost, let's go back to 2002, and the leader-elect, Tennyson Wells, Tommy Turnquest, Dion Folks, Bulgy, Allen drama, right? You had challenges in the communities back then, division in the FNM, and it led to a loss. Those divisions were knitted together, not completely, well enough so that by 2007, the FNM was able to win not a huge majority, but a significant enough majority. I think it was 23 to, I forget the exact number, but a reasonable majority to win the government. And then you had your challenges again. We lost. So I think both major parties have had their ups and downs in terms of what's happening in the street. But the grassroots community level is where elections are won and lost, in my view. And to allow your community associations to fall into disarray is a setup for failure. Don't care how popular you are as an MP, as a minister, as whatever. if your constituency associations, polling division by polling division is not healthy, my brother or sister, you ain't gonna make it. And so it is fundamental politics 101. You've got work to do. You've got some rebuilding, mending relationships to do. And understand that a fundamental premise here is that people who typically or historically vote F&M, when they are disgruntled with their party, they stay home. Okay? They don't necessarily vote PLP. So, but they can stay home. They ain't vote for nobody. And when they are back on board and feeling you, now you get that groundswell again. And so it is not as if you got to go into the precincts of the Progressive Liberal Party and steal people back. In some cases, perhaps, but that's more to the exception. What we really need to do is to go and find people who may have identified with the fundamentals of the Free National Movement of transparency, honesty, integrity, all of those things that may sound trite, but that ordinary Bahamians believe to be very important. Okay? And if they see governance by a Free National Movement government that they don't necessarily like or adhere to, then don't be surprised if they stay home.
There's another aspect to it, though, Dr. Sands, right? There's and I remember talking with during the campaign, talking with constituency associations from a bunch of the different constituencies where I thought the race was competitive, and what I heard consistently enough from the FNM that it stuck out to me from these constituency associations was that there was a disconnect in terms of that sense of inclusion, almost like the personal touch wasn't there. And in 2021, you would think that as a country, we are over the personal touch, quote unquote. And you would also think that the FNM has not really been traditionally a party about the personal touch. It's been traditionally more about ideals. But the absence of the personal touch was something that was significant enough to make people feel disillusioned and disenchanted. And so how do you address that from the central party structure? And of course you have to, I mean, I'm presuming that you've already started because you can't wait, obviously. But
you got to rebuild the constituency associations block by block. We have soldiers, some of whom have been in the battle for 50 years, some for 40, some for 10, some for 1. If you look at the size of the Progressive Liberal Party base and you compare it to the size of the Free National Movement base, quibbling aside, they're comparable, okay? The FNM base is probably a little bit bigger. So, you have the fundamentals for winning elections. You just got to be organized. And what that means is that you're a constituency association chairman and treasurer and secretary. They've got to know how to organize, how to get people involved in the discussion and so on and so forth. It is a grassroots effort. And that has to take place in every community, on every island, all across the Bahamas. When you fail to do that, except in rare circumstances, you are going to lose. So there are, we like to talk about safe seats, right? There's only a couple safe seats in the Bahamas, safe PLP seats and safe F&M seats, because if you had more, then the PLP would have won more than 4 seats in 2017. And the F&M would have won more than we won this lap. So, many seats are in play. They're battlegrounds. And if you do the work and you have a level of sincerity and you have a good candidate that understands politics and people, then you have the basis of the possibility of a win. You add to that a leader who is inspirational. You add to that a message that is relatable, a platform that is achievable, and an adherence to that, then you could not only win an election, but you can make a difference in the lives of people. And that fundamentally is what it's all about. Think about, forgive me for going back to 67, but the idea that Black people could think about running their own country was a hell of a message, eh? And it was inspirational, and the people who led that messaging included a diverse group of men and women. Now, there were no women that were elected to parliament in those days, but they certainly were involved through the suffrage movement. If you look at the breakout of the Free National Movement from the ranks of the Progressive Liberal Party, those men were inspirational and perhaps the better part of the think tank of the PLP. Now, some would argue with that, but certainly Cecil Wallace Whitfield was one heck of an inspirational part of the original PLP. Okay, so when you look at how did different elements make it to government, and how did they perform in government, all of these things have to be there. So your ground game has to be on point. Otherwise, you're basically on a hope and a prayer. Because if other things aren't there, and you're going up against headwinds, God help you.
Yeah, I remember being in one meeting just as a fly on the wall, and there were tears around the Constituency Association table, literal tears coming out people's faces, because the party just would not do. And you fill in the blank, whether it's resources, if it's money, if it's posters, if it's whatever it is. There was just this sense from this particular constituency association that the party is not helping, and that was very, very interesting to see. I just want to remind people that they can text us, Dwayne Sands, they can text us at 422-4796, and they can call us at 323-6232 or 325-4316 or 325-4259. I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead, Dwayne.
It's as you look at how strongly people view their politics. It's God first, it's country second, maybe family, then it's politics, okay? And then some people, it ain't even in that order.
No.
So when you see that your team is not fielding, they're not trying their best, or they are blowing it, many people take this personally, and they are hurt. As a matter of fact, I can remember after we lost in 2012, it took me a while to be able to get up and get on the horse again. Best, given it your all, you left it on the field.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, I have a very interesting text here. And bear with me on this. How will the party change the nonchalant, mediocre way they approach tentative candidates? As I was contacted to be a candidate, had a meeting with the candidates committee, they had no questions for me. They had no idea what area they wanted me to run in. They expressed no vision or expectations to me. My question of having a meeting with the then leader was brushed off. This was definitely unprofessional and unimpressive. They asked me to run, then said I must submit a letter. How will this be corrected?
Well, again, without sharing state secrets, we recognize that process is critical. And so where there are gaps, they will be corrected. Again, it is once you do a proper SWOT analysis of where you are, and you are sincere and honest about your challenges, and you're comprehensive about it, and you refuse to allow the tunnel vision that says, boy, we the best thing since sliced bread, eh? But you can honestly say that, hey, we have a problem here. We have some strengths there. This is what we did, and we did some amazing things even between 2017 and 2021, right? But the emphasis ought not be about what you did well, is what you didn't do well that you need to correct. And so when you identify the processes that need to be improved and you improve them, then hopefully you will get better candidates that are a better match to the constituencies and so on and so forth, or you place the candidates in the right place. Again, it is leader and leadership to come up with the formula that's a winning formula. People will look critically at Michael Pintard's leadership and Wayne Shan's chairmanship and either say, okay, they did a pretty decent job, or boy, they weren't crappy, depending on the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that the conclave would have addressed is this idea of both the and I'm going to use your words here, the strengths and the challenges of the present. So can you identify some of those for us?
Okay. For the most part, the country has moved closer to a two-party political system. And the Coalition of Independents did pretty well. They gained some 8,000 votes in the last election. The DNA has for all intents and purposes, died, okay? Now, some may say that Lazarus was brought back to life, but the DNA seems to be done. So one of the strengths of the Free National Movement is it has a history, it has longevity, it has assets, human assets, historical assets. It also has a culture that augurs well moving forward. The commitment of the people in the organization, I think, allows it to regroup and to benefit. The weaknesses of the Free National Movement include the fact that, hey, as we said, we have a coalition of diverging groups. And when those groups aren't singing from the same hymn sheet, it can be problematic. We have hurt FNMs, disgruntled, unhappy FNMs, and that is a challenge that we have to now go and find out why people are upset, hurt, unhappy, and see whether or not those concerns can be addressed in a positive way. You're also in opposition, and you don't have the resources of government. Politics is a voluntary army kind of scenario, okay? And people participate by choice. They don't get conscripted to join an organization. And so you've got to be able to raise funds in order to do the things that you need to do. That's hard in a tough environment when, people don't have money just rolling out their pockets as they used to. So that's some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses.
And you'd also talked about future opportunities.
Well, the future opportunities primarily lies in terms of, what is the goal? What is the reason for your existence? If your sole purpose for existence is to become elected and to enjoy the trappings of office, then you got a problem. If, on the other hand, the goal of your existence as an organization is to impact the lives of Bahamians and impact the trajectory of the Bahamas, then you have an opportunity to do some pretty phenomenal things by how you're going to address climate, how you're going to address youth, how you're going to deal with crime, and so on and so forth. And you can pull together the creative juices in a way that hasn't been pulled together before by effort and by influence. And that we are already seeing happen. The level of enthusiasm of individuals who want to be a part of the creation of the F&M's agenda, the F&M platform moving forward, it has been, and I am not exaggerating, it has been phenomenal. To say nothing about how the public perceives this administration, certainly the approach to the Free National Movement has been nothing short of electric.
But 45,000 people electric?
No, not yet. But, Quincy, we've been in election mode now since, May, June, whenever election was called. Then convention for leader, convention for this, election of that, and so on. And now we have constituency association elections. You gotta walk and chew gum, but at the same time, you have to be focused on getting the tools right, get all the tools in place. So if you ask me, have we made inroads into that 45,000 who did not support us? Yes, I believe we have. How much? I haven't the foggiest idea.
Okay. So what then is the party's approach to this kind of thing going forward in terms of, how frequent, let's say, I guess is a good way to ask it. How frequent will such things as these conclaves be?
Well,
is it an as-needed type thing?
Something as simple as convention. Our Constitution spoke of conventions being held every 2 years. The previous convention to the one held in 2022 was held in 2016. So we had not been to convention since 2016. We had a youth convention in 2017, but a regular convention, not since. In terms of conclave, as needed, but you have to make sure that you engage the organization in a way that it remains energized, that problems are identified, that you are getting ideas, getting cross-fertilization. So we have many different ways that we are having the organization function in a way that is consistent with the demands of the time. We're updating the way we communicate. You may notice that we don't use as much black and white paper press releases now. The public seems to be more interested in social media type releases, voice notes, short videos, and so on and so forth. We're using both. So you have to have the tools in order to create those types of ways to communicate with the public. And you also need to know, how do you reach the 18 to 25s? How do you reach the 26 to 35? Because you reach those people differently, but they're all important. The single largest demographic are the young people. So how you approach them, it makes no sense to try to get them through the dailies, the Tribune and the Guardian, because they don't read them.
And you believe that that your party is approaching getting those people appropriately and properly and well, I guess?
Quincy, I don't want to exaggerate the success, because, you do so at your own peril, right? What we say is that we recognize that we have a challenge. We have identified a strategy to reach persons. We have started. Now we have to assess the impact, recalibrate, change the approach, assess the impact, recalibrate. Bear in mind that unless something really bizarre happens, it is unlikely that an election will be called next week. It could happen, but I don't see that it will, okay? Or next year, it could happen, but I don't see that it will. We have seen some snap elections, right, in the Bahamas. We've seen snap elections all across the Caribbean for various reasons. So you function according to your best understanding of what the exigencies of the time are, and you try to do the very best that you can given your best estimate of when you are going to be tested next. And then you see, on the basis of attendance at meetings, participation, and so on and so forth, whether or not you are reaching where you want to. You can use polling data to objectify that. Obviously, that comes with cost. There are many different ways to find out how are we doing. But the word of mouth is also very helpful. When you talk to people in the bars, in the restaurants, at the fish fry, and so on and so forth, you get a pretty good idea of how they perceive political organizations.
Yeah.
When you look at in the barbershop, in the nail salons, and the hairdresser, you get a pretty good idea of whether you're likely to get a cut or whether you're likely to win. And those conversations, I got my ear to the ground, people typically say. Don't dismiss them as being unscientific. They have some utility.
Some utility. Those, in my experience, those conversations are more accurate than the polls that the parties pay for. Speaking of which, my last set of questions is around data, and in terms of this is the data age, right? Everything in business and in the commercial community is about data-driven decision making and using research and data to drive optimum outcomes. So what is the party's approach at this point now towards both gathering and responding to data?
It's fascinating that you asked that question, because one of the sessions yesterday was on data and demographics, okay? And we recognize just how important it is to measure, to quantitate, to objectify your gut, okay? It's one thing to say, boy, we got 98% of such and such a community. Well, how do you know that? And to a greater or lesser degree, in 2022 and beyond, data is going to be very important. Data in terms of telephone numbers that are valid, email addresses that are valid, names that are valid, etc. Home addresses, all of these things are critical, that your database needs to be up to date. How do you cross-reference that to the existing registration list and so on and so forth? How many of these people attend your meetings or receive and read your press releases and so on and so forth? So data is critically important. It can be as simple as likes on social media, shares, and so on and so forth, or more sophisticated with actual formal polling. The wealthier you are as an organization, the more robust the data can be. But you don't have to be incredibly wealthy in order to record and to measure. So yes, it's going to be an important tool moving forward. Now, that said, you've got to get the data and you got to interpret it properly. Because if you don't interpret the data properly, you could get run up on breaks just as well. So it's not simply gathering data, it is having the appropriate ability to interpret that data and make the right decisions as a result.
Yeah, because earlier you had talked about the fact that you had some data that was interpreted and acted on in a way that you felt did not go in the right direction. There was data available, but the wrong conclusions were drawn.
Right. Let's give a very simple example. The 2016 U.S. presidential election, every single poll, it seemed, predicted that Donald Trump would lose, and Donald Trump won.
Mm-hmm.
And all the pollsters started asking, well, how did we get this so wrong? And so this was a prime example of where the data was wrong, and in some instances was interpreted improperly. And Donald Trump became the president of the United States. We had a similar situation, perhaps in the Bahamas, that the polling data suggested a particular outcome, and it was dead wrong. Now, it depends on whose polling data, who you polled, what questions you asked, and so on and so forth, because there were other polls that predicted exactly what happened. So, you also have to be dispassionate about, what kind of data you're getting, to be sure that you're not just selecting the data that you like. Okay?
Yeah.
The data say I'm the nicest looking guy in the world, so I got that.
And the data wouldn't necessarily be far wrong. You're a handsome guy, no doubt about it. Yeah. That's going to do it for our conversation today, Dr. Sands. We are paying attention because we need the FNM to be strong. We need the FNM to be firing on all cylinders, because this is a dangerous time in a country to have a government that is unchecked and that is not accountable to the people. And since you all are our accountability, you all need to be on your game as much as you can be. The dealing with Dorian, dealing with COVID, some people still dealing with Michael and Joaquin and whatnot in the South, dealing with the domestic violence, which we pretend is not worrisome and problematic, dealing with the economic effects of 2 years with no tourism, which I think we're not going to see the end of that for a 5-10 year cycle, maybe, because people lost a lot. And I think to have a government that is not being held accountable for bad decisions is a very dangerous prospect. So with that as the backdrop and as the caveat, the FNM needs to get strong and get strong quickly.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to be a guest today. I would say that, we recognize the expectation, we recognize the duty of Her Majesty's loyal opposition to safeguard the interests of the Bahamian people. What is clear is that despite the incredible enthusiasm that ushered in this administration, that they have squandered an awful lot of goodwill very quickly. And we'd like to continue to take credit for some of that. And where we are challenged to be more vocal, more visible, more effective, we accept that challenge and we take it as constructive, helpful criticism. Thank you.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for us here on the Political Review today. Thanks again to our guest, the chairman of the Free National Movement, Dr. Dwayne Sands. Thank you, Wally, for such a great job as usual as our producer. And we will see you guys next week. God bless. Take care. Thanks, Dwayne.
Thank you.